Now we are ready for the long session, question and answers. And we have quite a number of questions. 9 of them already answered. We have a few open. The first question coming from Riyad Farah in Lebanon. And this question is to all panelists. And Riyad is asking about the oxygen plant generation, whether it's needed and necessary if a hospital has its own liquid or oxygen liquid storage and distribution pipelines. So is it necessary to have that plant in the hospital and where it should be installed?
So this is Elliot. I will quickly comment that we covered oxygen systems in one of the earlier webinars, and there is quite a bit of material that WHO has published on oxygen systems. So I would suggest referring back to that information, and if that is not sufficient, to contact one of us for additional information. Obviously, we need to have oxygen enrichment and sufficient volume. And whether that's liquid or tanks or concentrators depends on the circumstance and location.
Thank you, Elliot. The next question is from Najib. And Najib is asking, what about V and Q mismatch? And I believe he means the cardiopulmonary system, not only the pulmonary system alone. Any answer from the panelists?
I was responding to Najib before, so this is like a series of 4 questions that were coming one after the other. And he was asking about the use of the Ambu bag in the ventilators, and then if they can be for long term or not. And then he talked about the pulmonary or just the cardiopulmonary system. So I think in this case, my suggestion, and also the WHO as we have now, is anything that is using the Ambu bag with some kind of a pressure mechanism is not recommended for long stays and for ICU. It is only for emergency use only. And then the other thing that should be very important is any of the ventilators that is approved for emergency use only, it is approved for emergency use only, specific in that setting. It could be in a high income setting where the high pressure of oxygen is available, where suctions is available, where there is a nurse-doctor relation per bed, it's high. So I think we should be very careful on any use of the emergency use of ventilators in low income settings. And then, yes, there has been a problem, a cardiopulmonary problem, like a cardiovascular system problem in patients that have COVID. So it is not just only the resistance of the lungs, but also in the circulatory system. So in some cases, they're using anticoagulants and other things. And all this is being researched now. And then there's a new clinical management guidance that will be released by WHO. But I can put the link here of the one that we have now. Over.
Thank you, Adriana. And he also gave a follow-up question regarding using the ventilator with multiple patients. And it's a gray area.
Yeah.
We should not you know, use that as a resort.
So Tom's got an answer. Tom Larkin.
Yes, please.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of talk about this at the moment, and there's been a lot of recommendations and so on. So I think the SCCM, the AARC, the ACHP, all of these people are not recommending that you use multiple single ventilator and multiple patients. There is some work going on in Galway University in Ireland on a sort of a system that can, manage 2 patients at the same time. But some of the characteristics of the patients, like the respiratory mechanics or what PEEP they're on or CPAP they're on or resistance compliance, it's a difficult problem. So the recommendation is, there have been some publications on this over the years, but the recommendation is not to do that unless maybe if you're absolutely back to the wall, you might, it might be better than doing nothing, but certainly it's not recommended.
Thank you, Tom. The next
Elliot and
question,
Adriana have their hands up.
Adriana, do you have any further?
Yeah, just to say, so far WHO does not recommend multiple patients for 1 ventilator, especially in low and middle income countries, because the settings that you have to have and the controls that you have to have are detailed ones. So it is not recommended as of today. And that is, and if the patient has spontaneous breathing and different rates, then maybe you want to go to a non-invasive ventilator first, and then not using 1 ventilator for 2 patients. Over.
So Kostika had his hand up, and then I'll speak for a moment.
Yes, thank you so much, Karaf. So my quick question or my quick recommendation is that, of course, we're discussing Ambu vent or low emergency ventilator may not be used, not suitable, but why, if WHO and the team and collaborators, we come up with a basic setting, because we say that it's not allowable, it's not good, but in the end run, they use it. I've seen even FDA giving certifications, other national organizations giving certification because of the need. So why can't we draft something at WHO side, at least to give them guidance that if you want to do vent, you need flow sensor, pressure sensor, at this minimum or maximum standard, this type of, even Ambu bag. Some use very low cost Ambu bag in plastic, which has the pollution materials and so on. So can't we come up with some kind of guidance in this situation so that people may know what they're doing exactly?
Elliot, would you like to add
Well, I think
anything
Adriana
here?
has to answer that question on behalf of WHO.
Thank you, Kostika. We have an expert panel, and this expert panel is of therapists. All these problems are brought to this expert panel. We meet every Friday, and then we put all these things into consideration, and then we make WHO makes a recommendation or not. Some high-income countries have approved some emergency use ventilators, or the use of the 2 patients with 1 ventilator, but with very specific conditions. They say you need to have all these requirements and so if that is happening in a high-income setting with all the gadgets and resources and pressure gauge and monitors and so, it could be done. So WHO is not opposing to that, but it's not recommending it as a general procedure to be done elsewhere. So those are the kind of things in which we have to distinguish now. And there are so many cases that are coming up in, that we cannot keep the pace with all the innovations and solutions. But certainly the most important is to save the patients and do not harm, remember.
So thank you, Adriana. I just want to point out that there are several training programs that are available for free on the proper use of ventilators and ventilation. Some provide free certificates, and these are available globally. They're provided by many different organizations through many different mechanisms. They provide the opportunity to understand which ventilators are appropriate for which situations. They're global, they're not just in the US, and even some of them look at some of these older ventilators that are part of our stockpile of devices and talk about using, for example, bi-level ventilators, bi-level devices, which have been converted for non-invasive or invasive ventilation. The point is that we're learning a lot about ventilators today and oxygen therapy. And throughout the US, one of the current beliefs is, and I can provide articles, that ventilators should be a last resort because the actual survival rate with ventilator care has been very, 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 very low. And that other modes of care are preferred first before going to the ventilator. All of that adds to the complexity of, well, 2 patients on a ventilator. Some have demonstrated 4 patients on a ventilator. These are scientifically and technically complex to manage. But we're not here to talk about clinical decision making. We're really here to talk about the technologies and the training and the support for the technologies.
Thank you, Elliot. We move to the next question. We have a question about the aerosol and the treatment using the non-invasive ventilation and the high flow nasal cannula. And is there a recommendation to use that procedure to minimize the risk to health workers? We had a webinar on that last week, I believe, but I will give this question to the panelists if they would like to add on that, but I will also recommend Andrew to look at the previous webinar that we had some time ago.
And let me just make a quick comment that it's not only what's going on during the procedure and the use of the ventilator, but decontamination afterwards. So Adriana, I know you might have something. I'm not trying to put you on the spot.
Yeah, we did talk about this in the other seminar, as Bassett says, but it is very important to have a very full protective equipment, everything, and have special care because yes, the aerosolizing gives more risk, higher risk to get contamination for healthcare workers. So it might look as a more economic and easier solution, but on the other hand, we have other challenges and risks to healthcare workers to be infected. So yes, and there is a guidance on this in WHO. We will put everything on the chat for people to read it. Thank you.
Thank you, Adriana. We are running late, and we will take a few more questions, and then the rest of the questions will be answered in a separate session. The next question, when is volume controlled ventilation and pressure controlled ventilation used? Tom, perhaps you want to answer?
Yeah, so this is the age-old kind of, is this mode of ventilation better than that mode of ventilation versus the other mode of ventilation? And if you look at the literature on mechanical ventilation modes these days, you could be forgiven for assuming that there's about 150 modes of ventilation, but actually there's only about 3 core modes of ventilation. So pressure control versus volume control, they both have their advantages and disadvantages, and it's really about the clinical judgment of the physician in charge or the consultant in charge to decide for that particular patient which mode is more appropriate than another mode. So it's just, you know, you just have to make a decision based on the clinical need of the patient and where you are with that particular patient. Every single patient is different, so you can't, there's no kind of prescribed way of doing things. So I'll be giving another presentation in the next couple of weeks on modes of ventilation and the advantages and disadvantages. So you can't just say volume control is better or pressure control is better. They both have their advantages and disadvantages, but I suspect that pressure controlled ventilation tends to be the more preferred these days because it has value that volume control doesn't have, or it has, you know, functionality that volume control doesn't have. So
yes, Elliot?
And it also, one of the volume control, when you're forcing volume into a patient's lungs, they really can't be conscious. They can't be fighting the ventilator. So there's a decision made about the patient's ability to make breathing efforts and trigger the ventilator, and also the patient to take a reasonably full inspiration. So it becomes a very complex decision. And in COVID, we know that the actual patient's lungs are remarkably different than most other clinical settings. So it really becomes a clinically complex patient and situation to manage.
Thank you, Elliot.
Yeah. So could I just come back on that? That in any controlled modes of ventilation, patients can't tolerate, you know, being ventilated without being sedated and or paralyzed. in an induced coma. So when you're in a control mode, the patient is invariably not interacting with the ventilator. So you're in total sort of sedation, total paralysis, and then, you know, you if you like, ease that off over a period of time and then switch to spontaneous mode. So again, there's a big difference between spontaneous ventilation on a ventilator, non-invasive ventilator, and control modes where the patient is generally completely zonked, as we say.
The other point is that a lot of the really seriously ill patients have other comorbidities and are old, and so their health and vitality is often challenged. So weaning them off a ventilator safely and successfully becomes a whole complex problem for clinicians.
Thank you, Elliot. Unfortunately, we still have a number of questions. We will not be able to answer them, but we will answer them separately and share with all participants. We will move to the last session of today.
Oh, Basi, just before that, there's a couple that Adriana may be able to answer quickly.
Okay, please, Adriana.
You're on mute, Adriana.
Sorry, I was just answering. There's some concerns about the issue of the Ambu bag. I said, well, you can use them, of course, but it is not like a long-term solution. So just wanted to add that. There is a lot of, there are many questions about the reuse, decontamination. So I want to invite, even if there are some experts here that can help us, because we, as Ale said, we're going to develop training for the use of the ventilators, the decontamination, the reuse, all of these issues, and maybe even have like a procedure for a quick generic maintenance. We're working that with the WHO Academy, so we will be hiring a consultant to help us, but still we would like to have your information, you know, and the idea is that these training courses will be available for all eventually. So this is to the WHO Academy that is doing a lot of apps, and I will send you the link to the apps, because now they have been released just this last week, a lot of apps for COVID patients and how to manage them, and issues about PPE, ventilation, diagnostics, etc. And now that I have the microphone on the floor, I would like to share with you that these past 2 days, including today and yesterday, the World Health Assembly took place. It is the first time ever that this is done virtual. And then if you want to go there, I will put the web in the link, so the link of the website in the chat, so that you can go there and hear what your ministers of health of your countries responded or have said on the importance. Curiously, many are talking about medical equipment. So maybe we can even take those words and paraphrase it, so that then we can get more leverage on all the work that we do. No? So I think I really invite you to go and listen everything that was said by different healthcare ministers. And the very first part of the assembly was presidents. So there were like maybe 20 presidents talking about COVID and the importance, and somewhere in their sentences you can capture a word on related to our profession and our big goals of having the patient, the importance of the patient, and the importance of having the right technology for the right patient. So I want to take the opportunity to thank you all for your participation, and thank IFMBE for helping organize this, and thank Ale that made the presentation today on ventilators, and she and Gabi and others that are working in WHO very with difficult times to really find the best solutions, and also welcome all the innovative solutions to make really good care for patients. Thank you.
Thank you, Adriana. And we're coming to the last 2 minutes of our webinar. I will give a chance to our speakers and panelists if they want to say a few words, the last words before I conclude.
Well, I just make the comment.
Elliot, I would like to tell everybody that we'll be providing information on resources, including testing methodologies that ECRI has provided for ventilators to make it easier for you to do the work that you need to do.
Thank you, Elliot. Tom?
I was just going to say, we're looking for the large issues, the systemic issues, and certainly we've heard training. I mean, Adriana's talked about the WHO Academy, which has the AV capability, if we can add the technical content to that. And so we're going to be following up with her on several things there. We saw through the questions the abuses. We know that ventilators have been sent to countries and they, with not in the right languages and not assured of the quality. And so we want to help try to address that. You've heard Adriana talk about decontamination, trying to bring together information about that. So these are several of the large issues that we want to help respond to. I heard yesterday, Adriana and Ali, about the WHO's preparing a send out at the moment of equipment to LMIC. I don't know if you have a comment on that.
Thank you, Tom. And
Alec, do you want to talk about how many oxygen concentrators have been purchased or other things like that? Over.
Well, yes, for the time being, we are sending 4,000 oxygen concentrators to different countries, 5 in total, with all the oximetry and oxygen delivery devices. And in general, I just want to thank for following the seminar, for following also the information that has been published, and for sharing your expertise and knowledge. Just a remark that we have different kinds of expertise, and the more we can share, the better we can get in answers and in having like a critical and one perspective that solve all of our doubts. Thank you very much.
thank you for all our participants today and the speakers, the panelists, for joining us. And I would like to give you 2 things to take home. The first is, be assured that we are there to support and help. And if you feel you need any support, please contact us. You have all the contact information to all speakers, to the WHO, to the IFMBE. And the second thing, as you noticed, medical equipment are seen as a key factor in healthcare delivery. But unfortunately, they're the unsung heroes that still not fully recognized, the clinical engineering and the biomedical engineering professionals. And with that, please remember them. They play a key role in the healthcare delivery system. And with that, this is my last word for today. And thank you again. Be safe and stay safe, and watch for the next coming webinars and information series. Thank you all.
See you at the summary on Friday. Thanks.
Thank you, Tom. Yes, you will get a summary on Friday. Thank you, everybody, and take care. Bye-bye.